testify in front of her committee, like when you're sitting
Ben,
over
can you
there.
hear us?
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, March 11, 2019 Board of Education meeting. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are grateful tonight to have two honored guests, our two state representatives from Guilford, Vin Candelora, who's a representative from, I would just say North Guilford, I always forget the numbers, but in any event, very ably represents the part of Guilford, mostly north of Route 80, but a little bit south, and then Sean Scanlon, who represents the rest of Guilford and a little bit of Brantford. And we are grateful that you could come here this evening and talk to us a little bit about what we should expect in Hartford, from Hartford, this legislative session, and we can, if any board members have questions or comments, we hope that you at least entertain them. So I understand Senator Christine Cohen, former member of our board, texted me a few minutes ago and said that she is the chair of the Environment Committee, and they are still hearing witnesses. And at 6:30, she had 25 more witnesses, apparently. So she sends her sincere regrets, but obviously I think all of us have her cell phone anyway, so we can reach out to her as we would like. But anyway, gentlemen, what can you tell us about what's happening in Hartford?
All right. Yeah, I think Christine is quickly learning that the only job that you spend more time than the Board of Ed is being a state legislator. So she'll fit right at home. But it's good to see all of you again, and I always look forward to coming here this year. And I'm sorry that she can't join us, but we sort of spoke before we came, and we're sort of all on the same page. I would just say at the outset, the last couple of years I've come here, and Vinny's been here, we've sort of seen the same story play out, which is that the governor's budget comes out. It shows that our community is facing a loss, and then we go to work to do our best across party lines to try to restore as much of that money as possible. I'm very proud of the fact that we have been successful in that regard in the last couple of years. But you know, this is a new governor, it's a new administration, it's a new legislature. So our teamwork dynamic has not changed, but other dynamics in the building have changed. And so that is something that's going to be, I think, important for people to keep in mind between now and in probably likely May or early June, best case scenario, where we will figure this out for the final time. There's a couple bills this year that have been getting a lot of folks to write me and call me, and that mostly has to do with regionalization. There's 3 bills before the Education Committee, which Vin is on, so I'll let him sort of talk about those. But those are obviously gaining a lot of, I wouldn't say political momentum, but they're gaining a lot of traction in terms of a conversation piece. I don't think they're gaining much traction in terms of actually passing, but they have started a conversation, and hopefully we can have one tonight about that. But I would just say, lastly, that this is the beginning of a long process, and I know that your process and our process does not always coincide in the best way, but we will do everything we can over the course of the next couple months to make sure that Guilford is as protected as we can be when it comes to our ECS money. And like I said, we've been successful in the past. I have every reason to be optimistic that we will be able to make the case as to why Guilford should get the money that we've been getting the past couple of years, given all the great work that we do here at very little cost compared to some of our peers. But it is going to be a fight, and we're going to be in the fight together, and look forward to keeping you guys apprised of what's going on.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as Sean pointed out, the budget process has just really begun. I think one of the issues that caught me by surprise a little bit was, again, the proposal of putting a portion of the teacher retirement onto towns. And I think that, whether we like it or not, is going to be part of a conversation, not even necessarily in terms of financially covering, having towns financially cover teacher retirement, but sort of figuring out our whole retirement system and the burden that the state has to pay. I think that we're going to hear a lot about that. The second part, the school regionalization bill, I am serving on education now for the first time after 12 years. I got on that committee. I think the school regionalization bills have sort of set the discussion in the wrong place. And so I don't see those bills moving forward. And I think what we're probably going to see is task force type language to talk about if we were to look at regionalization of different districts, how do we go about doing that? Because I think the goals and the way it's set to populations does not make sense. And I also think part of the conversation we're going to need to have is how do we make our current school regionalization bills better? So when you talk to a lot of districts that have shared school services, like in Durham, I represent Durham as well, there are a lot of issues that a regional district has that we need to sort through. And I think that has to be the first part of the conversation before we put more towns into that pot. And I think the other piece we're hearing about again is the school safety bill on classroom safety and the procedures for dealing with students that might be acting up in a classroom. That bill was vetoed by the governor last year, and I think it's come back for a public hearing, and the stakeholders will be in the room again, and I think that might be something that might be moving this session as well. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer questions as well.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, it sounds like you're not thinking that the regionalization bills are going to go forward. I'm hearing that. And I know they've talked about mandating regionalization versus mandating sort of cooperation, or even just suggesting. Where do you see those ideas standing, and as it pertains to Guilford?
So all three bills have been sponsored by Democrats, and so as a Democrat, I sort of feel uniquely qualified to chime in on this. I think they're going the wrong way. I think each of the three bills is a forced mandate, and I think the approach that they should be taking is to incentivize towns who decide that they want to regionalize. If we, for example, decided to, Senator Looney's bill talks about the probate court map, so we obviously share a probate court district with Madison. I don't think that proposal was super well thought out because there's towns in the probate district that already have regionalized, and so, but to take that just as an example, if we were to regionalize with Madison, I think that should be something that you all and Madison and the people of this district decide is what's best for us, not because us in Hartford tell you that we think it's best for you. And so I would prefer to see an approach that incentivizes you to have those conversations, and maybe that starts with things like we already do share a transfer station, or it starts with animal control, things like that, to show that there is some benefit of it, but it's not immediate top-down, we tell you what to do, and go from there. So I agree with Vinny 100%. I think this is heading definitely towards a task force. I think that to the extent that we should have voices on there, I'm not volunteering any of you to serve on that task force, but if you have input as to what you think we should be talking about there, I hope you'll tell us that. But I don't see the approach that some folks, my colleagues are taking right now is going to be the one that's going to be successful ultimately.
In the bills that have been proposed on regionalization, there was a test of, 2,000 students in the district, and which we would be exempt from, I assume.
So there's three bills, and Vinny can chime in, but two of them are the 2,000. There's the third bill, which is Marty Looney's bill, is that under 40,000 people in the town would be forced to go. So, right, is that true?
Yeah. And what's interesting is studies show that the optimal size on what I've read is between 6,500 and 7,500 students is the optimal size, which most towns fall well under. So even the 2,000 mark doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that's why I think it's an issue that's really going to be studied probably before any movement is made.
I would just chime in too that, like anything else in public policy, if we were to start from zero, I think that we probably would have designed Connecticut maybe a little bit differently, and we would have had some semblance of regional governance, maybe not with schools, but in some sense. We have 169 different kingdoms, and we're fortunate to live in Guilford. I'm proud to be from here, and I love the way we do things. But every other state has some semblance of this. It's very hard to go from nothing to something, though. And it's also even harder to do that without input from the local leaders that are the ones that are really going to be bearing the consequences of the policy decisions we make in Hartford. So I'm not saying that I think regionalization is bad in general. I think these plans are not the best in terms of for our community and being thought out, and I think we just have taken a different approach.
So the advantage of getting old is you get to see things twice. We had regionalization once upon a time. It was called counties.
Yeah.
And we did away with the county governments for all sorts of reasons, but inefficiency chief among them.
Sure.
And, it's just very hard to imagine that level of regionalization ever in the state of Connecticut. The tradition is just too strong
Yeah.
for local control. But we already, one frustrating thing for us is we already do share a lot of services with Madison and with Branford and with Old Saybrook and Clinton and a bunch of other places. But we do it where it makes sense. And we don't do it because we're forced to do it and by a state Department of Education or by anybody else. And, it's got to be in the best interest of the kids in this district if we're going to do it. And I'm more than a little afraid that some of these proposals are not taking that into account. I haven't heard a lot about quality of educational services in the debate.
That's the other big issue, that the approach is all wrong.
Well, the other issue is that, given that property tax funds schools,
Right.
physical distance relates to psychic distance. The degree to which the district becomes somewhat more amorphous, you tend to lose people who have an affinity for that particular school system. So you might, not only is there little evidence about a lot of savings anyway, but you might end up losing votes for all the wrong reasons. Next thing you know, you've got regionalization, you can't get a budget passed.
Yeah.
So I'll say a word about the teacher pension, since Mr. Candelora is, I'm sure, very, and let me just start off by saying, we understand you're from different parties, but you know what? I don't think any of us all of us know how you act in a bipartisan way to help this community. And that, I think one of the things that we're most pleased about as a board is that when people say, well, we watch you, we don't know who's the Democrat and who's the Republican. We don't know, we don't act as partisans, and we're grateful that you have carried that through in your work in the General Assembly and representing our town. And we think the people in this community, that's how they want us to act. But I will say a word about the teacher pensions, because I find it exceedingly frustrating, honestly. And it's frustrating kind of on a, I understand the rationale for it, that there is a large part of teacher compensation that the state of Connecticut pays for without any input at all or any contribution from the municipalities. And, one thing that I think is true, I feel is true, is that the state has done, whoever the proponents are of this happening, have done a really not great job in explaining how this all happened. And how, when I say how it happened, how is it that the state first picked up this obligation? On a really slow day, I actually read the debates in 1917 for when the committee hearings were considering this. Teachers' unions in the state of Connecticut begged to be left out of this. They had their own local pension plans. The teachers in New Haven voted 650 to 50 to not go into the state plan, and don't make us join the state plan. We're doing fine, just leave us alone. Gee, where have we heard that before, right? Just let us take care of this. But the state insisted and made it a state program and said, we're not gonna make you pay. We're not, this is our, we think this is important to do because we want to, and the rationale was not crazy. They were worried about some of the smaller towns getting teachers poached from other states. Every other state around us had a teacher pension program. And corporations were, now this is World War I, corporations had a labor shortage. They were starting to increase benefits to attract people. And so teachers were going into other areas, and women were going into other jobs. It was a 99% woman occupation at the time. When the workforce opened up to women, the companies were offering pensions in order to attract employees. The problem, though, has been that the General Assembly has been effectively the sole negotiator as to what the benefits are going to be. Because it's done by law. It's not done by collective bargaining. It's done by passing a statute. Now, we have 5 bargaining units that have pensions that are not part of the teacher bargaining unit. or the teacher pension plan, teacher retirement system. We collectively bargain all that. And there are some that they're on different terms, and we're okay with contributing to those because we're collectively bargaining them. We set what the benefits are as part of the global package. The teacher retirement system, as long as the General Assembly is doing it, we're not at the table. And it's frustrating to hear the General Assembly say you towns need to pay for something that you don't have any voice in negotiating at all. And it's also frustrating in that our pensions, our non-teacher pensions, are 86% funded according to the actuaries. It's pretty good. The teachers are at 50%, something like less.
A little higher, but.
Okay, 50 something. Okay. So it's a little. I'm sure there's a parable or a fable or something that talks about the animal that like saved for winter, and then the animal that didn't save for winter goes and robs the animal that was saving for winter or something like that. Is there an Aesop's?
And the grasshopper.
And the grasshopper.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
The ant.
My kids are getting old. I haven't done the fables, but I hope both sides of the aisle in Hartford understands how frustrating this is for municipalities. We feel like we've been, and there has also been no explanation about how this happened. Some human beings made the decision not to fund these pensions. Who are they and what were they thinking? If we did that, then we'd have some accountability to the voters, and the voters would be able to say, you didn't do your job. But we haven't heard any of that. It almost acts. It's almost as if this just happened. Like, oh my gosh, nobody saw this coming. This is exceedingly frustrating. I mean, Mr. Candelora, you look like you're.
Yeah, no, I mean, we could be here for an hour on this issue, but the process of our pension system, how it was funded, how it was underfunded is quite amazing. And, it's probably an area where government got so big and people made assumptions that they didn't realize. I mean, many people in the legislature didn't know that the state was authorized to underfund the pension plans without approval of the legislature. So a lot of times the legislature thought it was being funded, and it actually wasn't by agreement of previous administrations. So it's been a long, terrible history, and I agree. If there is going to be a shift, there has to be much greater dialogue because, even when it comes to, the ECS formula that we put into place, that is a true formula that is now putting money into schools based on second language learners, based on income, based on student population. It's fair, but on the flip side of it too, there's got to be accountability. When you read in the paper sometimes of some of these communities that have written checks and have spent money that's unaccounted for, that's a problem. And that's, both sides need to have that, both parts of that issue need to be discussed. And I'm hopeful it will be, especially, when it comes to these issues of the pensions.
Well, I think that I would echo what our chairman just said. As I look at what could come down from Hartford, the most terrifying thing would be the camel's nose under the tent of, and I don't care if it's $10,000 that we contribute the first year to the teacher pensions, because I know that 3 or 4 years down the road, that's going to be 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. I mean,
The proposal
it's just going to wipe
escalates.
out our budget.
Yeah, I mean, the governor's proposal right now, it escalates quite quickly, so the first year doesn't look so bad.
Yeah,
And you
but
start going
no,
into
but
third and
it-
fourth
But it's
year,
a
and
it's a huge problem, and to my way of thinking, this is another move by the state employees union, who's sitting there saying, the state can't fund our pensions and the teachers' pensions, so let's hive the teachers' pensions off on the municipalities so that the state can concentrate all their money on our pension. I really think that that's what's behind this whole thing. And the idea that the municipalities are going to be required to pay for something that we don't have any say in how it's negotiated. I mean, if we sit down at a table with a union and we come to some sort of agreement, we're happy to honor that agreement. But that's not the way this is proposed. This is what's proposed is we pay for it, and then the people in Hartford decide, well, what's it gonna be? Oh, let's have a 20% increase in the teacher pensions because we don't have to pay for it. And it's, you know, it's taxation without representation. It led to an unpleasant disagreement several hundred years ago.
I don't think we're quite that far yet.
No, but that's.
We do have a sugar tax, so we're pretty close.
One of the things that, I am truly grateful for, what both of you have done for this district over many years. I think it's an understatement, kind of that you were successful over the last few years in saving us from some cuts. I think we ask this regularly, we should. What, and Vinny, especially now that you're on the Education Committee, what can we do as Board of Ed members, as community members? I'm sure you're hearing from people and that's helpful, but are there other things that we can do to help support you kind of advocate for us?
I think the open dialogue is just very important. I remember when I first got elected, my freshman year, we were dealing with the in-school suspension bill that everybody voted for except me, because my superintendent called me up on the phone and said, "What are you doing?" and explained to me the problems with that bill. After it got out of the legislature and it was starting to be implemented, we realized there were all these problems. And then everybody in the legislature came to me and said, "How are you so smart to vote against it?" And I like telling that story, but it was really because of that conversation. I didn't serve on education, made the assumption that our superintendents were talked to before the bill was passed, and they had not been. And that can happen with bills. We saw that with the classroom safety bill.
Right.
So I would just say open communication is just very important, and we're available. Bother us at any time.
Yeah.
And likewise, right? We
Yeah.
are also available. I think you know that but right, but thank you. That's helpful to know.
The other reminder is that Christine's not on education, right? Yeah, she obviously is familiar with the work that you all do,
Right.
but when you're not on a committee, you really don't know what's happening on a committee, just because you're so bogged down in the work that you're doing, and until you sort of poke your eyes up from your own committees when the committees end, it's very difficult to know what's going on. And so, Paul is great about this, Bill is great about this, but all of you should always be great about it. You see something on Facebook, you get an email from a constituent, you see something in the paper, just send us an email, give us a call. We really want to hear from you because, as Vinny just said, that's when I put the phone down, call my aide and say, "Hey, can you pull up this bill for me, or can you find out what's going on?"
Right.
And you sort of do the homework to really know. And once you are armed with that information, it's easier for me to go to my leadership and say, "Hey, my superintendent and the board chair just called me," than it is for me to just say, "Hey, I Googled this and I
Right.
wonder what's going on here."
Right. That's good.
Well, that's really helpful. Anybody have any other questions?
Mr. Voss, if I may, I would just, I would encourage you both to continue to be very skeptical about that classroom safety bill. I know that there have been some revisions. The revisions do not address the foundational problems that at least I have with it. I'd be happy to have further conversations with you as that continues to move. I agree with you. I think it's going to continue to move. I think we need to continue to oppose it for a number of important reasons. And I would just add for the board that our representatives return every phone call that I make to them, and in fact, both joined me at a class at UConn this year, and after leaving, had students say, "Did you introduce them correctly? Are they really in two different parties?" and couldn't get over how well they work together and collaborate. So I can't thank both of you enough for everything that you do, and I was on the phone with Christine pulling into the parking lot this evening. I can't thank the three of you enough for all that you do in support of what we try to do here.
Thank you, and thank you. Appreciate you joining us.
And I just want to say, Dr. Keene, I know this is probably our last time being
She
here
keeps saying things like that.
when you're here, so sorry to make the retirement party continue longer, but I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for our community for such a long time, and we will
My
miss
pleasure.
you here in this district.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Thank
you
you both.
so much.
So I want to jump around a little bit. let me ask if is there anybody here who wants to address us on an agenda item this evening? Item 5? Okay. So then, with the board's permission, I'm going to ask the sole student representative who has 12 pages of
Not 12.
single-space typos. You're all alone.
Yep. So I guess I'll start with the high school then. So the annual End the R Word campaign was promoted last week, organized by Unity Club. And this campaign focuses on discouraging the use of harmful and derogatory words towards special needs students. Members of the Unity Club handed out wristbands and asked students to sign the pledge to end the R word. And currently, rehearsals are concluding, and tech days are concluding for the spring musical this year, Anything Goes, which is a comedy musical about a transatlantic cruise liner. And it's all about the ridiculous cast of characters. It's a really fun show. Tickets are on sale now on the GHSTA website, that is ghsta.weebly.com, for $18. GHS hosted the Connecticut High School Fencing Championships this Saturday and Sunday with a lot of success. We had 10 total finalists, including Grace Beatty, Shayla Flynn, Anna Ankatavanich, Lindsay Smith, Isabel LaBelle, and Leo Westgard, and Oscar Scott took the gold for men's épée. Evan Schultz and Eric Lepeque won the silver in men's foil and men's saber, and Ella Stanley received bronze in women's foil. The review of the vaping policies has been moving forward, and student leaders have been meeting with Mr. Masseni and Mr. Rabin multiple times to make edits and provide input on the old vaping policies. And the new policy has been made more stringent and were presented to the Policy Review Committee, which has moved it to the full board. Winter sports are entering the postseason, with boys hockey which made a deep run in the SEC tournament, made it to the quarterfinals of the state tournament. As we know, I just talked about fencing, but they were undefeated. Boys swimming, Aiden Henry and Finn Henry placed first and second in the 500-yard freestyle event at the SEC tournament. Girls basketball finished with 10 wins in the regular season and made it to the second round of the state tournament. The International Baccalaureate program will be having a core night on March 27th, in which we will be celebrating and recognizing the work that we completed over the past 2 years in the extended essay, the creativity activity service projects, and theory of knowledge. Parent-teacher conferences are this Wednesday and Thursday, and there's been a lot of sign-up for that. The Unity Club, again, has sponsored a screening of the movie The Hate U Give on March 7th, and after discuss the movie and the issues it presented in order to commemorate Black History Month. It is also World Language Week, and Spanish Honor Society sold bracelets and made announcements about Spanish culture and language. And Guilford High School senior Miriam Kish will be competing in Indianapolis on April 7th for the American Legion National Oratorical Scholarship. She has won local, district, and state competition levels and has a chance to win an $18,000 scholarship. So far she has won $3,450. And at Baldwin, they also have had a Spread the Word to End the Word initiative where guest speakers visited 6th grade teams, and the entire school participated in a signing of a pledge to end the word. They also have had community days where they have devoted portions of early release days to focus on community building, with the next community day scheduled for March 27th, and the focus will be compassion in action. And there's also been focus on enrichment activities, which are non-graded self-directed opportunities for students to explore whatever area of interest, and teachers act as facilitators for the activities, which includes filmmaking and inventing, and this has proven successful and they're going to continue it. And at Adams, they have held badminton tournaments for students throughout February, and there was a lot of great participation. The National Junior Honor Society sponsored a pie throwing contest on February 15th, in which students paid $1 to enter a raffle for the chance to throw a pie at a teacher. Parent-teacher conferences are scheduled for the 25th and 26th of March, and Adams will be holding their second Walk for Water event on March 29th And students that volunteered will walk for 45 minutes on a course around Adams, and will have an Ashley's Ice Cream Social in the cafeteria following the fundraiser. And now, Guilford Lakes. This Valentine's Day at Lakes, students were treated to a cultural arts presentation by Poetry in Motion, in which they were able to learn about the history of hip-hop through dance primarily. The Outdoor Adventure Club has been helped by the PTO enrichments, and Mrs. Shaw led the children in creating a lean-to hut in which all members were able to fit inside at once. And students and staff celebrated Dr. Seuss's birthday last week by dressing for the occasion in homemade Cat in the Hat hats and also whatever other hats. And the 4th grade community service leadership group collected over 700 books during Read Across America to be donated to Read to Grow. Guilford Lakes is also hosting a PTO science fair this Wednesday from 5:45 to 7:30 p.m. And at A.W. Cox, on Friday, March 8th, the Knights of Columbus hosted a fish fry event from which all the proceeds went to raise funds for the renovation of the shed at Cox. Kindergartners have been learning how to read and sing and the basics of coding. In 1st grade, they are learning problem solving and engineering and inventions. 2nd graders are learning more advanced writing skills like grammar and hooks to grab the reader's attention in the writing. 3rd graders are learning about map scaling and digital maps, which they have found to be more helpful and versatile than paper maps. And in 4th grade, the students are learning about geotechnical engineering, in which they're learning about the layers of the earth and also learning how gondolas in Nepal are used for transportation, in which they have designed an experiment to determine the best type of gondola, and will be writing to a village in Nepal to share their findings. And at Melissa Jones, March is music month there, and it's the first time that they've had a full-time music teacher, and they write that they're very appreciative of the full-time music teacher, and the students are as well. In 4th grade, students are learning to play the ukulele, in which they're learning how to play several songs, and 4th graders are also working on singing songs and playing games from Africa. 3rd graders are playing the recording, and up next they have their recorder disco unit, where they will play classic disco songs.
Classic disco song.
Classic.
I'm not sure about
That's
that.
not an oxymoron.
Seemed like an oxymoron.
In 2nd grade, 1st grade, and kindergarten, they're preparing for their spring concert, which will be May 17th at 2:30 in the gym. They are working on selecting their favorite songs from the school year to share with the audience. The favorite songs from 2nd grade include This Little Light of Mine and Yellow Submarine. 1st grade is using a song that utilizes American Sign Language while they sing. And kindergarten is working on several songs about trains, including I've Been Working on the Railroad. And save the date for the spring concert. That's May 17th. Yep. And finally, Calvin Late. 3rd and 4th grade classrooms completed their science and engineering units, where they investigated the issue of oil spills and erosion, in which they looked at important scientific and engineering practices, in which they also developed inter- and intrapersonal skills, including collaboration, negotiation, and reflection. Kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classrooms will embark on the science and engineering investigations throughout the spring, with teachers learning and preparing for units during last Friday's Professional Development Day. The LEAT community also gathered recently for a Choose Love Assembly in order to begin the 3rd theme of the year for the Choose Love theme, which is forgiveness. In small groups, students and staff will discuss how letting go of negative emotions can have a remarkable impact on their own emotional health. And Calvin Leet School is also celebrating Dr. Seuss Week in order to coincide with their participation in the readathon to benefit Sarah. Students and staff will enjoy themed spirit days and a variety of classroom and school-wide reading activities. And apparently one of the spirit days is Dress Like Mr. Grimm Day. So that should be a blast.
Yeah.
That's that.
I mean, I've never seen him without a white shirt and a tie.
That's sort of right on the news.
I get it, okay. All right, questions, board members, have of our sole board student representative?
Wonderful things happening.
A lot of
Great
things
to
happening.
hear. No, thank you, it's great to hear.
Great report.
Really great to hear.
Good report.
Mia's finishing up her work for the International Baccalaureate Diploma.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Got her extended essay in. No stress at all in the household relating to that.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kim.
So why don't we, should we go to the 10.3, Dr. Freeman, the appointment of the, or
I
discussion of the?
would be very happy to.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Is everybody okay with that? Okay. 10.3 is to act on the appointment of an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction and assessment. And I know Mr. Kazin participated in some of the interviews. I participated in some of the interviews. But do you want to introduce the subject, the topic, if you will?
I'd be happy to. I thought I'd start with the process and then talk to you a little bit about the candidate that we bring forward tonight and invite her to come join us. So, as Mr. Scanlon noted, the beginning of the school year started with Dr. Keene's announcement that after 20 years of service, she would be stepping away from the school district. We began a nationwide search to fill this position in December. We advertised for this position in Ed Week and with AASA that are both national organizations and publications. We also advertised heavily regionally and networked heavily regionally to make sure that we drew the appropriate amount of attention to this position. I can't tell you how pleased I was with the quality of the pool. We received interest from across the country. We received formal applications that stretched from northern New England to South Carolina. We had a pool of approximately 50 candidates, so we had 42 candidates actually to be specific. And it was an incredibly qualified pool. We had sitting superintendents. We had a number of sitting assistant superintendents for curriculum and instruction or directors of curriculum who applied for the position. We did have some internal interest in that position as well. We created a process that included 4 different rounds of interviews with 15 different participants in the interview process. Mr. Bloss and Mr. Kazin both participated. We had members of our administrative team, members of our teacher cohort, parents from the community, students who participated, as well as coaches from within the curriculum office who participated. 4 rounds of interviews, one of which was a performance-based interview that involved digging into some fairly dense research around teaching and learning and watching videos of instruction here in Guilford and talking with us about what was seen in the instructional video, as well as a brief writing assignment. It was one of the most impressive pools of candidates that I have seen in a long time, and it was what I consider to be a very thorough process. Through all of that, I am happy to bring before you tonight Dr. Anine Crystal, who most recently has spent 9 years here in Guilford, working as one of the instructional coaches. In fact, one of the first 2 instructional coaches hired into the district when we only had 2 instructional coaches in the district. Working closely with Dr. Keene, Dr. Crystal helped to build the coaching cohort and the coaching model that we have in Guilford now. You know, I went for 7 years here in Guilford before I brought an internal hire in front of you for approval to fill a position. I can't tell you how excited I am that this year we have brought more than one internal candidate forward to fill an important position, and that tonight I get to bring Dr. Crystal in front of you. She did not have an inside line on this job going into the process, but she came through the process unquestionably as the strongest candidate, the most ready candidate, and right now the only person that I am looking forward to partnering in this position, considering the fact that Dr. Keene is stepping away from it. I couldn't 2 months ago, I couldn't think of doing this job with any other partner other than Dr. Keene. Now I can't think of doing this job with any other partner other than Dr. Crystal, and I'd be happy to invite her to the table and ask her to spend a little bit of time with all of you.
Sure.
You have her resume in front of you.
All right, come on up, Dr. Crystal, and
Welcome.
Likewise.
Well, welcome. I guess the obvious place to start is why are you interested in this position? What do you,
I think I did that before.
yeah.
Well, who wouldn't be? This is an amazing place to be. And I will tell you that 9 years ago, when I came for my coaching interview and I was about to start my doctoral work, I walked out of Tom Forcella's office and I called my husband, who's sitting here tonight, and I said, I'm taking this job. And he said, don't you want to think about it? And I was so blown away and impressed with Dr. Forcella, Dr. Keene, the whole interview process, and every person that I had met through the interview process. And I just knew that this was someplace that I belonged. And I won't say that over the 9 years I haven't thought about other, looking at other positions, but I've not been able to leave this district. There's so many wonderful things going on here. So many amazing teachers, amazing students, amazing faculty. It's just an amazing place to be, and I'm so thrilled to be able to stay and continue in a different role, in a new role.
Folks have questions or comments or thoughts?
Maybe you could give just your overview of the process as the insider, as a recipient of the interview process. And
Every interview process, both interview processes I've been through here have been very challenging. I just feel like there's been so many wonderful questions asked of me, so many thought-provoking questions asked of me, so many interesting discussions, interesting material to read, which has been my experience as a coach as well. All of the professional development I've had here, all of the things I've learned from Dr. Keene have really just expanded and improved my understanding of education, my learning, and have in turn been able to help me to help other teachers in the district as well. So it was a difficult, very difficult process to go through. Very difficult, but very educative and very interesting process to go through as well.
So if you walk into a classroom, and you want to see, what kind of learning do you expect what can you see that tells you that effective learning is going on?
Well, the first thing I notice is the rapport that the teacher has with the student. What is the climate of the classroom? And then I look at things like the task. What are the students doing? What is the teacher doing? Is the teacher standing at the front of the room? Is the teacher sitting with the students? Is the teacher facilitating? So I look at those kinds of things. And then I like to just sit and talk to the students and ask them, what are you learning? Why are you learning it? And how do you know if you've learned it? And that last question, I think, has been a more challenging one recently that we've been working on, at least in my time at Baldwin, is to allow kids to be able to answer that question. How do I know if I've learned something? So focusing on student agency and focusing on the metacognitive processes that go with learning. So I think there's a lot that you can take from walking into a classroom for a few minutes and sitting down and talking to some students and just getting the lay of the land and seeing what's going on in the classroom.
I have a question for you. So we are very lucky here to have really a high-performing district, lots of wonderful opportunities for kids to kind of stretch and grow. But not unlike any other school across the country, we have some students that over time, whether that's as they enter kind of middle school age or a little later, start to become a little disengaged. How do we keep kids engaged? How do we keep, what are your thoughts about that?
That's a challenge. I've been reading a lot about phenomenon-based learning, which some of the STEM learning now is leaning towards phenomenon, and our new curriculum is geared around phenomenon-based learning. Having kids be agents of their own learning, so making a lot more choices about what they learn, how they learn, and why they learn, and what path they follow to get to that learning. So I think that personalization is huge, to meet kids from their strengths as opposed to looking at weaknesses, and build on the strengths they have and the interests they have. I've been listening in the car to a book by Ken Robinson called Creative Schools recently, and he talks a lot about that. He talks about finding kids' interests and their passions, and then teaching them the things that they need to know through those interests and passions.
So I've been exploring and reading a lot about that, and I think that that has a lot to do with engagement. And we're finding at Baldwin as well, which is where I've been for the past few years, that giving students those opportunities to create their own learning paths, we get so much bang for our buck out of that, and the kids are really way more engaged than if we're just handing them materials and telling and giving, as opposed to letting them make those decisions for themselves.
Thank you.
There are kind of two steps, as I understand it, to curriculum. One is that you develop a curriculum, and the second is that you get the teachers to actually implement the curriculum. How do you go from step one to step two?
Yeah, there's the intended curriculum and then the actual curriculum.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the coaching has been huge as far as that's concerned, because the coaching, working with Dr. Keene, we become familiar with the intended curriculum, the goals and the outcomes that we're looking for in the intended curriculum. And the coaches are really able to work with the teachers to facilitate that kind of application and implementation of the curriculum as it is intended to be implemented. And having worked in other districts, what I used to see a lot of is everybody's going to come together on this one day, and we're going to talk to you about all of these curriculum materials, and then you're off to interpret however you interpret. And I think that one of the strengths of Guilford is that coaching, that cadre, that cohort of coaches that go into classrooms and work with teachers in their own classrooms with their own students, and really ensure that the intentions of the curriculum are being carried out.
Yeah, so building on Ted's question, tightly coupled curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment understood to be a system. The closer that's linked, the greater the chances of learning. The assessment part is often very weak in most places, or it's relegated to state tests or standardized tests, when we know that assessment is a powerful form of teaching and learning.
Sure.
What goes on here at Guilford that does more justice to the issue of finding out whether or not we're meeting those goals, whether those curriculum and pedagogy things are linked?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about formative assessment lately. So taking the emphasis away from, not to get rid of summative assessment, but to take the emphasis off of it and talk more about formative assessment. What is going on day to day that informs the teacher's instruction and also informs the student's understanding of their own learning? So I think we need to address it from both ends. The students have to understand what they're getting out of what's going on in the classroom, as well as the teachers having to then learn from that and make changes based on what they're learning from those formative assessments. So I think those two angles of formative assessment are really crucial and critical to being able to really see progress and to evaluate the kind of progress that's being made, and then when the progress is not being made, to change the instruction in the moment. And I think that's something that we haven't done in the past, not as much here as maybe other places, but we've relied more on summative assessments, and those are like postmortems. So if you're doing a postmortem, there's not much you can do about it after the fact. So the formative assessment piece is huge, and it's critical.
I'd be curious about your thoughts about the evolution of curriculum in terms of trends, and where do you think the curriculum changes are going to be in the future?
I think there probably will be more personalization, more project-based types of learning, more student ownership over where they're going and what they're doing. Next month I'm traveling to Finland, and I will be touring the schools, and it's going to be very interesting to go there and look at how they structure things, because I've read that they are going to more of a project-based, personalized type of learning format, so I will be able to see it in action, and it's going to be fascinating for me. Because I just personally have seen so many gains in students when they have control over what they're learning, and they're way more engaged and interested in what they're doing. So I think that's a huge trend. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. The danger is that it's not done correctly. And instead of becoming truly student-activated learning, it becomes teacher-generated projects. And then teachers can say, well, we're doing project-based learning, but we're giving them projects to do. So we want to try to reframe that a little bit.
Do you see any changes in content areas?
Well, I think there's going to be more integration I
Interesting.
think that's what's down the pike for us is more integration, because in the real world, there are no isolated subjects. Everything is integrated. So if we want our kids really to be critical thinkers and metacognitive thinkers, then that integration needs to happen.
This is a more specific question, but we've had a lot of public interest in more arts integration into the classrooms, or, more art instruction, but trying to, we had a workshop about integrating art more into the classrooms. In speaking to what Mary just brought up about more connection between the subject matters, how do you see maybe integrating that a little bit more, or do you support that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many opportunities to integrate the arts with the content areas. And I would want to look into that a little bit more and see what the time constraints are and what the curricular constraints are, but to look at that and see how we could do that. I think the arts are extremely important to a child's development and their learning, and it definitely has to be considered. So I think there are ways to do that. I would just want to study that a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I know first of all, I know for sure two things. I know Dr. Freeman feels very strongly about this, and I also know that the process was an exceedingly rigorous process. I know I was actually in on the performance component of the interview process, and I can vouch for how impressive your performance was on that aspect of the interview process, and I trust. I think we all trust the process. Here, Guilford is a very process-oriented town, and as long as we go through the right process, we tend to wind up in the right place. So, we can do. Dr. Freeman has asked us to act on the appointment this evening. If we can do what we want, obviously, if there's a motion to approve the appointment, we can proceed. If we want to talk about it, we can do that. But I'll defer to the board.
I move that we make the appointment, that we approve the appointment.
I'd second that.
Okay. Well, I should ask for a vote first. All in favor? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Well, congratulations.
Well,
We,
thank you.
without, at the risk of stating the very obvious, you are to be filling very large shoes.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, we talked about, why is Guilford where it is today? In terms of our performance standards and from the state and it's not an accident that we're here where we are. The superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the board, the faculty made conscious decisions to do professional development in a different way and to do instructional improvement in a different way. And it wasn't that long ago that we were, let's go, what do you think about going to these professional learning community models? Right? I mean, you remember that. And that was like, I don't know, that's different. We shouldn't do that because it's different. And the fact is, it's not mere luck that has us where we are today. It is a series of conscious decisions by people in leadership and on the faculty and parents, for that matter. But we look forward to you continuing in that, and we are excited about this. And while we will clearly miss Dr. Keene, we are very excited to have you.
Well, you're trading a Kentucky accent for a New York accent, but I'm very, very humbled to be filling those shoes, and I hope I can do her justice. I really do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so where are we? Let's go back to item 4, which is action on the minutes of February 4th, 2019. That was the meeting that we appointed Dr. Hirsch, and also we voted on our budget, I think. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Just one correction.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Move in second, then corrections.
I was present at the meeting, but I wasn't documented as being present.
Okay.
So if we could just
Yep,
correct that.
okay, so
I will make a motion to accept the minutes.
as corrected.
As
with
corrected.
I'll second that. I would also comment that, did we really have the student representatives at that meeting? I don't think so.
At the February 4th meeting?
Yeah. That wasn't a regular meeting, that was a special meeting. Why would we have had the student representatives there?
No, that's true, yeah, they should be deleted from the call to order, yeah, that's true. On item 1. Okay, any other corrections on those minutes? All right, with those two corrections then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then February 11, 2019, that's our regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Changes, corrections, clarifications? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Abstain?
Mr. Kazin abstains. And then February
25th.
25th, which was the workshop meeting, which is where Mr. Regan was appointed as co-principal at Adams. And is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved?
Second.
Any corrections, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I abstain.
And I join you.
And Mr. Kazin abstains. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that everybody? Okay, right. Okay, great. All right, now we're getting back on track here. Dr. Balistrasi,
Yes.
how are we with expenditures?
Expenditures for the month of February were $4,389,523.71. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February were 58.55% of the budget as compared to 58.15% in the prior year, so really quite similar. I think the kind of big piece of news over the last month is that we did, as expected, receive the first of two payments for the excess cost grant. It came in at approximately 75.7%. We do expect, certainly from precedent, a decrease in the second payment in May, but that was certainly good news. We did discuss expenditures and the warrants in our operations committee just prior to this meeting, but I certainly am open if people have questions or further discussion.
Okay, in the absence of any questions, is
I
there?
will make
Go
a
ahead.
motion, right, to approve the expenditures for the month of February.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Item 7 is communications. Anybody receive any communications of note? I received one, Dr. Freeman and I received one from a parent who is, their child has been in a private school in New Haven through 8th grade, and they're coming into the high school, and they have been taking Mandarin Chinese in middle school, and they wondered whether we could offer Mandarin Chinese.
They
and-
reached out to me as
Oh, did they?
well, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, we went through this about 10 years ago, I want to say, or maybe, no, it was less than 10 years, because you were here. It was probably 7 or so years ago. Dr. Myers wanted, really was advocating strongly for that, and we thought we had a really neat plan where we offer Arabic, one of the only schools in the United States to offer Arabic. Madison offers Mandarin Chinese. We're right next door. We tried to see if we could do it. In the abstract, it makes sense. In the practical implementation, it did not make sense. Maybe you could just summarize what happened.
So we ran into a couple challenges. One is the challenge of credit being transferable across independent districts. So to some degree, it goes to needing to remove some of the hurdles to regionalism at the state level. Secondly, there were transportation challenges because both districts would be required to provide transportation. And not the most important, but perhaps the most immediate, was the fact that Hand and Guilford High School currently have very different high school schedules. And one community would have to dramatically change their high school schedule in order to make those things align. So great idea. But there were some statutory limitations, there were some credit limitations, and there were some local challenges that we just never got out of the box to address. Additionally, it's just a language that faces significant certification shortages in the state of Connecticut right now and would be challenging to find. Great question. I'm not giving up on it.
Love to do it.
Yes.
Right? I think all of them. Go ahead.
Could it be done more easily through technology? Could one teacher be in one place and deal with 2 or 3 students at the same time?
Possibly, if we did a distance, then it would simply come down to the credit issues. But as I listen to our legislators talk about taking a thoughtful response to regionalism before jumping into requiring towns to consolidate, that's one of the items that CAPS has brought up, and I will make sure that our legislators think about those opportunities. This could, in fact, the 3 bills pending could, in fact, be signs that opens up some of those opportunities for us.
But I think we'd like to do it.
We'd love to offer it if possible, yes. I don't see it being viable for this coming September.
No,
but
of course
it's certainly something that we're continuing to strive for.
is it possible I mean, people have been moving towards these technology-based learning things. Are there other districts that have this besides Madison where we might be able to hook something in?
Yes, yes. If technology becomes the answer, then you don't have to only partner with your nearest geographic neighbor. There are other districts that do it. And currently, there are private opportunities for students to continue their language learning, either locally or through distance learning. It's not currently part of our credit catalog at the high school, but it doesn't mean that students couldn't. I believe Otwapam locally here in Guilford has Mandarin courses that they offer, but they're not high school credit-bearing courses at this time.
Could a student pursue high school credit bearing, like an online, program that could
Possibly.
be approved through the district if they wanted to continue with that
Possibly.
language?
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
some accredited online programs that we use even
Right.
for other things.
Right.
So it is possible. It's basically the World Language Department Chair evaluates the program, the principal
Okay.
has to approve. So it's not impossible.
Right.
It just depends on the quality of the program and the amount of time and
Right.
All
Okay.
opportunities.
I mean, maybe the curriculum committee can take a look at that.
Yeah, because I know some of these students who are coming in have had several years of Mandarin and are very, adept at the language, and would be ashamed to not, and it is one of the largest growing languages internationally, so it would be nice to see us supported in some way and get, yeah.
And then I'm sorry?
Nothing.
And then I also got a couple of letters yesterday from two Adams students advocating that we make the day after Halloween a school holiday. And I didn't quite know what was going on, but then my daughter Mia said that that is part of a school exercise called persuasive writing. And so you are supposed to write a persuasive letter to some kind of a governmental official to advocate for something that you feel strongly about.
I got 3 or 4 on a variety of topics.
Did you really? Yeah.
They're coming in.
Yeah, so
And
I haven't responded yet. I'll put it on
Gary's on the edge of his seat.
were you persuaded?
I'll put it on the agenda for next month. How about that? Very good.
Persuaded.
It'll also be the last Friday of October.
Yes.
No, I'm into that.
Oh, is that right?
Well,
So
that's
this
just
year's-
my opinion. I don't know. This is part of the
okay.
student's position.
Yeah. No,
Now
that
you're
would
famous.
no.
Try
No,
your
you-
song,
lost on
persuasive,
them.
No, I don't think that was part of their recommendation. All right. So, any other communications?
No.
Okay. Item 9, superintendent's report.
I do have a number of things to touch on with you this evening. First, I would like to begin by noting that March is Board of Education Appreciation Month, and I would like to start by thanking all of you for the time and the effort and the thoughtfulness with which you lead this district. We truly do appreciate it. Also, I know that most board members are aware, but for the community's benefit, last Thursday evening, March 7th, the Board of Finance did settle on a town and an education budget. The budget that this board forwarded was reduced by a bottom line of $125,000. It brings the increase down from a 1.98 in your final budget to a 1.77% increase. We will have recommendations for you by your next meeting, suggested areas in which we could absorb that reduction. I do believe that we will be able to absorb that reduction without significant impact to staffing or programming. We'll put together a list of suggestions for you that you can discuss at your next meeting. Other than that, the budget now moves forward to town meeting and then to referendum. This is a period of time in which we have to share with the community what is in our budget, what's not in our budget, and the values that this budget continues to support, the focus on teaching and learning that this budget continues to move forward. So we will begin working on that and reaching out to you for any way that we can help you as you help to move this budget forward. Another piece that I just wanted to bring to your attention, and you have an exhibit in your folder this evening that speaks to it. I wanted to point out one of the small practices that we are becoming more and more engaged with. 3 years ago now, the coaches in district began using video as a tool to help. That's it, Dr. Balistraci, you're looking at the colorful document you have. The coaches began using video as a tool to help teachers in their development and to reflect on their own work as coaches in the district. Last year, in fact, Dr. Crystal was the subject with one of the teachers with whom she works of a district-wide learning lab, where we spent a morning focusing on her practice using video and how she used it to help one teacher reflect more effectively on her own work. This year, we were excited that we, in fact, moved that practice forward to all of the administrators, all of the principals and central office administrators. And so, in fact, this year, every principal has access to a video platform, and I have required each of them a minimum of 3 times over the course of the school year to capture video of them interacting with teachers around teaching and learning. This is not to see a principal at lunch duty or bus dismissal. This is to see their core work with teachers around teaching and learning. The principals then have the opportunity to reflect on and annotate that video, and then they can upload that video to me. I have an opportunity to view the video, to annotate the video, and then we sit down together and talk about the work that we see on the video. And so while the principals are going through this process 3 times this year, this means that I'm going through 30 of these cycles this year with principals and central office administrators. What I'm hearing from the principals is that while they're resistant and they don't like seeing themselves on video, they are finding this a useful tool. And in fact, I met with a principal just last week who pointed out that as he was going through and annotating, he kept calling the assistant principal into the office to say, look at this, look at what's happening right here on the video. The fact is, the way we remember our performance is not the way we would see our performance if we were looking at it objectively. In fact, every time I think of a class that I'm teaching or a presentation that I'm giving, I have dark brown hair in my memory. When I watch it on video, that's not the reality. And so whether it's coaches with teachers or principals viewing themselves, the video has really become a lever that we're using this year, not for itself, but to help us focus more clearly on developing those supportive yet challenging environments that we want to develop, and developing that professional environment that we know we want to have, and then getting to the core, as Dr. Crystal noted, of really valuable tasks in the classroom. What are we asking students to do? How are teachers planning for that? And how are principals helping teachers to be more effective in that work? And so the little document that you have is sort of a theory of action that the principals, that the district leadership team put together this year, placing video as a tool in the center of our work. And so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that that's a tool that we're using. We're currently exploring 2 different platforms. Coaches are using one, principals are using a different one, but we know that video is going to continue to be a tool that we use to improve our practice here in the district, and just wanted to share a bit of that with all of you. We have another learning lab coming up this year. Coach Lindsay Fiorentino will be the subject of that learning lab. We'll be using the video tool again, but this time watching her work with a full professional learning community, not focusing on one individual teacher. So we're excited about the work. Principals were maybe a little resistant at first, but I believe that they're recognizing the value as we get into the heart of the work, and I wanted to share a little bit about that with all of you. The last piece that I wanted to draw your attention on is that in your packets tonight, you also have a summary of the professional learning activities that took place Friday here in district. There's a lot here. There's nothing that I want to go through in detail here, but I do want to draw your attention to a couple themes. First, I would encourage you to look at the variety of presenters and notice that you will recognize names among the presenters. The facilitators of our professional learning, for the most part, are teachers and administrators and coaches in our district who are doing the work on a daily basis, who are then sharing their practice with their colleagues. You'll see Dr. Crystal in there. You'll see a number of people in there doing the work. Couple pieces that I do want to call out. We did have support from Yale working around the social and emotional wellness and looking at ways to make sure that we are creating those supportive yet challenging classrooms that we are focusing on. And particularly at Adams, working with the science department at Adams, we have just launched what will be a year-long exercise with people, with a group, the Center for Assessment out of New Hampshire. This is a group that focuses deeply on assessment practices, primarily on formative assessment practices, and how you use assessment to improve instruction and leverage learning, not to measure your performance and compete with the town next door. And so we're very excited about the work. That dovetails very neatly with the new science curriculum that we have launched. And so the science teachers are, in fact, redesigning a couple cornerstone units with a lens on formative assessment, and this will be an extended relationship with the Center for Assessment that we're also very excited about. So that's there for your perusal at a later time, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it and ask you to focus on the presenters and the topics that you will see. Combination of health, wellness, and instructional rigor that you will see running through the work that we did here Friday.
And lots of science. Yeah, you heard that from me. A lot of engineering units are being rolled out. We showed you some examples of some things we field tested last summer. Now they're being rolled out to all the students. And so they're kindergarten, first, second, and then third and fourth did a follow-up of their engineering practices. So those units are really going strong right now. So science is alive and well at the elementary school as well as the middle school.
And none of those topics represent one-day conversations.
No,
None of
no.
them are stop what you're doing and professionally develop for 6 hours. Every run of them represents a timeout and a day where we could go deep into a topic, but it's a topic that we've been talking about and will continue focusing on through the work locally. It is not a one-touch opportunity in any of the topics that you'll view there.
This is really terrific.
Yeah,
Thanks
this
for
is helpful. I
sharing.
don't
Yeah,
think we've
no,
ever
this
seen
is really terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Keene pulled it together as a tool for the principals, and at
Yeah,
our
it's great
DLT
to
meeting
see.
last week,
It's really
decided
great
that
to
it would be
see.
appropriate to share with you.
This is great.
And that, I think, concludes my report this evening.
Then on the board agenda, 10.1 is to act on a couple of personnel items. The first is to ratify the resignation for the purposes of retirement of Patricia Oddie at Jones. Did you have it? You must have.
I
Or your
don't know
kids
if
certainly did.
Yeah, but I did not have her personally.
Okay.
But, two of my kids did.
39 years as a teacher in the Guilford Public Schools. And so why don't we just ratify, a motion to ratify her resignation, first of all?
So moved.
Second.
Bill, she's in the room.
Oh, I didn't see her. Where is she? Oh, there she is. I'm sorry, my contacts are very bad. She said she wanted to make sure that we accepted the resignation. So what if we didn't? If we didn't, would you keep on?
What was Plan B?
Well, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, with the board's and really the town's gratitude, I think you've had as you know, you've had a tremendous amount of influence over countless lives in North Guilford in particular, but they that's part of Guilford.
It is.
Yes. So I cannot tell you how grateful we are that you chose to start here and that you chose to continue here for 39 years. That's outstanding. So thank you. And then the other resignation for the purposes of retirement is Raisa Rodzinski, a physics teacher at the high school, after 19 years of service. So is there a motion to ratify her resignation for the purposes of retirement?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Again, with our deep gratitude. She has been recognized repeatedly as one of the nation's outstanding physics teachers.
Yep.
One of my daughters has her now and says that she's just an outstanding teacher and has learned a great deal, and we're going to miss her as well.
Absolutely.
Bundle of energy.
Yes.
And watch out, she throws bricks.
Well, that's not good.
Well, they're made of styrofoam.
I see. That's not so bad then.
It's a
Okay.
physics thing.
Yes. All right. So you'll pass along our
Absolutely, thank you.
gratitude to both of them. And also, we have a resignation of Lindsay Mapes, a social worker at Guilford High School. Is a motion to ratify that resignation?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 10.2 is to non-renew a non-tenured, non-renewed, non-tenured teachers, I don't think we need to identify the
No,
teacher.
this was
We
a
can do-
one-year appointment, and this is just a matter of course. The position was filled for 1 year only, and the individual going into the position knew that, but we need to officially non-renew the positions just to hit all the state's requirements.
Okay, so consistent with with Exhibit 10.2, is there a motion to ratify that non-renewal?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
10.3, we've done. 10.4, this just a receive item for the 2017-18 annual report. I think it was emailed to everybody.
It was, and
I thought it was outstanding, frankly. That has changed for the better over the last 10 years. It really looks great.
And I would just like to extend my thanks to Mrs. Lori Hahn, who helped put this together. And I would like to note for the board and for the community that much of this content is also contained in last year's annual report in a much more user-friendly format. And so with accompanying photographs and links to extended information, much of the information is the same. I would encourage everybody in the community to please view our annual report from last school year. And again, with my thanks to Mrs. Hahn, it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into summarizing everything that goes on around here in a school year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on the annual report or any comments? Okay. So item 10.5 is to receive for possible action a recommendation to increase pre-K tuition fee. I think we're probably not ready to talk about
No,
that, right?
no.
We talked about that a little bit in operations tonight, and there's just whether we wanted to discuss a little more about what direction to go. So we'll just table that with the board's permission. 10.6 is to receive several recommendations from the policy committee. Do you want to talk
That's
about
correct,
those?
yes. So the policy committee met within the last month. We have 2 policies and 2 regulations to put before the board as receive items tonight. The first is the policy and regulation that is currently called smoke-free environment. It is, I do want to note, just on the agenda, the numbers are incorrect. These are 5322, policy and regulation, both numbered in that manner. We were, this was brought to our attention by administration and students at our policy committee meeting. They have spent a good amount of time poring over both this policy and this regulation. In particular, there is a great deal of concern among the administration and among the students in front of us about vaping, in terms of kids' health, about vaping in terms of the extent to which it appears to be happening among some of our young people, and have brought to us, again, this policy and this regulation in the hopes of addressing these issues more substantially. I will note that as you read through the policy and reg, you'll notice that one of the several things that get addressed, but one of them is around discipline. Students, in fact, were pushing for stricter kind of consequences for kids who are caught vaping or caught distributing vaping paraphernalia. I may not be using the correct language. I will note that Dr. Freeman, the administration, is looking into make sure that we need to just do a little more research to make sure that we're in line with, or the suggestions here are in line with other requirements.
Yeah, other
I don't know if you have
policies and particularly state statutes around out-of-school suspensions. So I will make sure that the policies align or have suggested amendments for you before you take action at your next meeting.
But it was really quite impressive to have students who spoke really very eloquently about their concerns for their school environment, about their concerns for their fellow students' health. I'm going to ask that we receive those 2. And then the other policy and regulations, 6310, graduation requirements. The high school administration has brought this forward to us. As you recall, or some of you recall, several years ago, we increased the graduation requirements. There is an expectation that requirements may be increased again
fairly soon. It is really about an implementation timeline rather than whether these things will happen. This is, if you go through, this is addressing items like increasing STEM electives, creating some changes in terms of world language credit, creating what's called a mastery-based diploma assessment.
Health
I'm sorry?
and health
And health,
is
right.
the other big one.
Oh, that's right, and
Yeah.
health is the other big one. Again, the administration spent some time going through these with us in the policy committee, and we can certainly spend more time getting detailed information for people who would like to understand exactly why some of these changes were made. But this is, again, it doesn't change the total credits that will be required, but just changes some of the pieces of the puzzle. And it is, once again, our administration kind of, in my own words, staying ahead of the game and making sure that we are prepared for whatever changes come down the
These
pike.
changes will bring us fully into alignment with the graduation requirements that are currently scheduled to go into effect for this incoming freshman class as they enter in September. And so all of these changes here will bring us completely into alignment with any of those requirements. We are already ahead of the 25 credit requirement. We already have that on the books.
And much like the last time, the Board of Ed approved graduation requirements, as Dr. Freeman is suggesting, they impact the incoming class, so
Correct.
that classes that are sophomores,
This was
juniors,
rolled
and
out
seniors.
actually last week at a freshman, incoming freshman
Right.
orientation I was present for. So there was not a lot of confusion over it, but just kind of a little, oh, okay, and there's a little explanation of it, but I think some parents went away wanting a little bit more information, so maybe we can,
Okay.
We can certainly
That's
work on a
good to know.
Yeah.
communication, particularly after the board approves at your next meeting would be a
Right.
timely opportunity to send out more information.
So I encourage the board to look these over in the next month. Again, we will hear more from Dr. Freeman if there are things we need to understand differently about 5322, either the policy or the regulation. And obviously, feel free to reach out if you would like more information, because we can make that happen.
Dr. Calastrese, I'd just like to note again that it is, it's a different conversation, and I would suggest a better conversation when students join us at the
Yes.
policy meeting to discuss the policies and how they impact their lived experience in our schools. It was just a pleasure to have the students and the high school and middle school administration part of that conversation.
And as I said, I totally agree. And as I said, it was really wonderful to hear the many ways that they are concerned, right? I mean, they're concerned about their school community, but they're genuinely concerned about the health of fellow students and concerns about students not involved in vaping being pressured into vaping. I mean, there was a genuine concern and really well thought out presentation.
And just to note for the board that there were representatives of the guidance department there as well. And while the policy may lean towards consequence, there was a lot of conversation about intervention and support as well. And just to note that we never think about consequence or punishment without thinking about prevention, intervention, and support and education for our students as well. So there are other efforts that are going on, and in fact, suggestions that came from the students that I know Mr. Regan is already pursuing when we think about the opportunity for high school students to speak to our younger middle school students about the decisions that they're making. So some of those suggestions, while they may not be represented in the policy that you're receiving, are already gaining traction in the district.
Okay, so we'll just carry those over to next month. All right, item 11 is committee reports. Anything else from the policy committee?
The policy committee we actually had a pretty busy meeting, and we have a number of other policies that we are continuing. We had with us some members of the health services, social services group, and we're going to actually have a extra policy meeting that will be posted. I believe it is the last week in March, to allow them more time to present their suggested regulation and policy changes.
Around restraint and seclusion.
Around restraint and seclusion. And we just want to make sure that, because our committee does not meet again for another couple of months, that we make time for that. That will be a publicly posted meeting. I believe it is the last week in March. But we are busy.
Okay. Operations Committee?
Well, we had a busy session also. We reviewed the status of the busing program. I think we pretty much concluded that we're, in terms of gaining times and efficiencies, we're probably as far along this year as we're going to get. But in terms of getting the buses and getting the kids home on time, I think we're meeting obligations. We spent a fair amount of time talking about facilities repair and modernization. We've got a big summer of work coming up. Everything from heating and cooling systems to electrical upgrades, work on the turf field that was covered by the warranty has now, all the contracts have been signed, and when as soon as the weather will permit, that work will start. We are somewhat hopeful that the field will be available for the fall season, but let's see how the weather turns out. We reviewed where we are on actual performance versus the budget, and kind of an outlook of where we are for the rest of the year. And I think we're going to have to be vigilant. It's going to be this is going to be a tough year to make budget, but I think we have some plans, and the committee's going to review this very carefully each month for the rest of the year. I think that
All right.
pretty much sums it up.
All right. Curriculum instruction and assessment?
We may get in the spring.
Okay. I should,
Almost in the spring, May.
almost this spring, okay. That's spring. I should indicate also that I appointed Dr. Hirsch to the Operations Committee and the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee, so. Town committee liaisons, any town committees that we should know about?
No.
No? Anything? No? Okay. Learn Board of Directors, I think we got an email about that today, about the next meeting.
Yes, I thought I saw that as
Is there
well.
any report otherwise?
I don't
Okay,
think
I guess
so.
not. All right, item 12, public questions. Anybody with questions, comments? All right, failing that.
Oh, there's
Yes,
some-
please, come on up.
Sorry, I was on soft seating in the back, so
Oh, that's fine.
I couldn't quite.
We don't get that.
No, you don't. Hello, my name's Polly Reeder, live on Moose Hill, and I wanted to come back and talk about a couple of things again, if I could, just to touch base. At the January meeting, I had mentioned that, talked specifically about 4 students having left Cox just up until mid-January due to, which I guess you could largely, basically categorize as management issues. And actually, I became aware of a 5th since that time. So it was still back at that time period. And I'm just asking this question from a standpoint of coming from a career in higher education and focused on student development, student life, administration, and then the last 10 years of that, specifically on governance. So my question is after I said that at the last meeting, who here followed up on it in any way or asked a question of a staff or administration?
The superintendent is responsible for supervising the operation of the schools. The structure here is that the board, and this is a state law, this isn't something that we created. The responsibility of the Board of Education is to create policies and to hire a superintendent. The superintendent is the supervisor over the operations of the schools. That is not our function. I will tell you, though, that after you were here in January, I received several emails from parents who expressed a very different experience than you expressed at the January meeting. I did not receive any emails concurring with what you were offering. So, and I responded to the people that emailed me, and I forwarded them to Dr. Freeman. But fundamentally, the management, if you talk about the management of the schools, that is an administration function, and it's not the function of the Board of Education. And do you want to follow up on that?
And I would be happy to have a meeting to discuss any of those concerns outside of this public forum. Paula, you know that you can contact my office, and I will meet with you at any time to discuss your concerns. I will not, in a public forum, discuss families who have made decisions to move. I will not do that in a public forum.
As I recall, it was much the same invitation to you in January.
Yes, sir. And as I said in January, my husband and I had met with Dr. Freeman, and it was, a good meeting. I think we all three of us felt that. And as I think I tried to convey, but I perhaps was not clear about, before that meeting, my husband had emailed you, Mr. Bloss, and of course you, as appropriately so, had said, happy to listen and whatnot. This is what the board's role is. Please meet with Dr. Freeman first. We did that, and in that first email, I think he was pretty clear about his concerns about the culture and climate of Cox. And then he followed up quickly with a second email to you after we met with Dr. Freeman, being very clear that we had had this meeting, it was good both ways, and then being further specific about concerns about the culture and the culture climate being interchangeable there. And, saying that there is quite a bit of research that could be brought to bear that would illuminate the things that are not perfect about Guilford and the concerns that we have, as well as others, and many of which are not coming forward because of fear of retribution. And my husband we've never received a response from that email. So, and you had said that.
I answer all of my emails.
Well, in fact, I remember being copied on a reply by Dr. Freeman to your husband, I believe, if I recall correctly, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I would urge you to
Yes,
do
and
the same.
yes, he did email respond on the first one, yes.
I would urge you, I'm going to say the same thing I said in January. If you have concerns about the way schools are managed, talk to Dr. Freeman. This is not something that the Board of Education is going to become directly involved with. Our job is to evaluate the superintendent and to enact policy.
Right, and what I'm saying is when you hear of things that could be aberrations and could be concerning, I'm just saying it's due diligence from a governance perspective to ask of administration. That's my only, and be it Dr. Freeman or be it others.
And I have talked to Dr. Freeman about governance at Cox. I've talked to him also about the emails that I got from people who disagree. So.
Right, and one thing that was said when I raised that in January about concerns about the climate, which of course is, now priority one sort of, in effect for the district, which is wonderful. And you had said that you'd never heard these kinds of, heard these remarks before from anyone else. But my husband had already emailed twice about them. But we're talking about a large, broad topic, I understand.
Right, and I will repeat what I said in January. Your family is the only one that's communicated with me on this issue.
Well, and right.
In saying that there were concerns about the climate, I've received several emails from parents who have a different opinion. Now, I'm not going to sit here, I'm sorry, I can't at a public meeting here, this isn't a trial, I can't weigh your concerns versus their lack of concerns. What I can do is suggest to you that you talk to the superintendent, and he is the manager, he is the executive. We're the policy-making entity. We do not supervise the management of an individual school. That's his job. We supervise the superintendent and evaluate the superintendent annually, and part of our evaluation is how schools are being run through the administration. So that I can urge you to talk to Dr. Freeman. You can meet with Dr. Freeman. I'd be very surprised if Dr. Freeman wouldn't continue to meet with you or meet with your husband, but that's the best I can say. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I don't want to belabor it anymore. And, it is, I wondered if the climate survey results could be made available by school, because as they are now in the report, it's in aggregate, like all elementaries.
Yeah, they're made available to the public in aggregate. They're made available to the climate committees of each school specifically, and every school climate committee has representations of the parent community at that local level. I can look into, they're available.
Can I
Okay.
I want to just also address you, only to reiterate what Bill, and I am a parent of, now my fourth child going through A.W. Cox. And I have also received, just because I'm in that community, numerous face-to-face conversations, emails, phone calls, to speak to the kind of polar opposite of what you're bringing to bear. And it's not to discount your concerns, but just to speak to that, to the appropriate channels, as Bill said, but I just want you to consider that and kind of take that into thought when you return to us inferring that the process isn't being followed, because it really is. And but I just wanted to share that to you as another Cox parent, that and if I had received alternate opinions or input, and I'm pretty reachable and pretty accessible, I would share that as well. But I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Maura. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I never became vocal, even, amongst a parent at a birthday party or on a playground or whatnot, until I started hearing things from other parents. And then I felt that it was okay to, share experiences back and forth, which, there are a number of good experiences as well. The other piece I wanted to touch upon is the article in the Journal of Adolescent Health from 2017. The title is "Using Hospitalization and Mortality Data to Identify Areas at Risk for Adolescent Suicide." And overall being that, and I know you all are aware of the article and whatnot, I'm saying this more so for anyone else who might be, looking at the meeting. So it goes across all the school districts across the state, and that Guilford came out, even with test scores, income levels, race and ethnicity, single-parent households, all those things taken into account, still, we came out fourth highest in the state in terms of 5 years of data of suicide attempts that ended up in hospitalization. And specifically with a calculating of the numbers in this peer-reviewed published study, that the expected rate, there was in life, an expected rate of suicide attempts that would result in hospitalization, but that Guilford's was almost double that of what would be expected, even with all these different socioeconomic, et cetera, test scores and whatnot taken into account. And in addition to that, there was just a year prior to that, data from 2009 through 2013, which was part of the Connecticut Garrett Lee Smith Suicide Prevention Initiative and that grant. But Guilford had 7 suicides over those 5 years and 282
No.
attempts.
If I may,
Yes.
We've talked about this
Yeah,
article,
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like a dozen
Well, that's not the
times.
article. This last is not the article, though. That's information that's available online.
So if, we have talked about it, but I would like to at least make one statement since this is going on camera again. The first is that this administration takes the mental health of our students very seriously. And this year is in fact, has put mental health at the top of the priority. The second thing I want to say is the peer review process is a very important process in research. It doesn't mean, though, that everything that comes out kind of accurately reflects what's going on. It is why in research one must do many studies before one lands squarely in any particular place. My own concerns about that study are many. I will only voice one at the moment, which is that the accessibility and placement of hospitals for kids requiring psychiatric inpatient care are not distributed evenly across this state. And accessibility plays a pretty significant role in who gets hospitalized and who does not. Not the only role, for sure. So I would really urge people to both A, understand that we as a district take the mental health of our students very seriously, and 2, to recognize that while kids across the country, nationwide, appear to be experiencing more anxiety than we've seen before, and that suicidality is a great concern, I do not believe that the evidence that is out there at this moment suggests that Guilford is in any deeper trouble than any other town in the state.
As I recall the article, it was identifying behavior. And so there's an argument that towns that do a better job in identifying risky behavior.
There are
There's a way
so
to read it
many
as a
ways,
positive,
there's
in
so
fact.
many ways to look at it, and it is, I think any study like this can give us a place to find some useful information. I just do not want people to take it as the be-all and end-all of what's happening with our Guilford youth. I think that's a dangerous assumption to make.
And I agree with all of that, and with all of that said, I want to highlight for this board and for the community a number of the steps that we are taking and have taken. I want to remind the board that this year we are partnering with Guilford Youth and Family Services with a suicide prevention program grant that we have secured in the district, and that targets our students in the youngest grade level. I want to highlight our rollout in the community of the Sandy Hook Promise Say Something app to give our students and our community members another way to reach out for help if they think that they or anybody that they know is in trouble and needs assistance. I want to point out that the information I provided with you on the activities that we engaged in on March 8th have a number of instances around mental health, including our collaboration with the presenter from Yale just on this past Friday. And I want to point out that in this high school on Connecticut CMT Day, while 11th graders will be engaged in the state SAT Day, sorry, CMT is gone. While the 11th graders will be engaged in the state scheduled SAT, every other student in every other grade level will be going through a series of informational sessions, including one around health, anxiety, wellness, and how to get support when you need support. To your point, Dr. Balistraci, while I may have problems with the article, we have not minimized this concern.
absolutely
We, in
not.
fact, take it as our first responsibility to do whatever we can to make sure that our students are safe and well and making safe decisions.
And in recognizing that this is a community issue.
A community issue and a nationwide issue.
And a parental issue and with youth and family services and the other aspects of the community. This is not just a school issue.
Correct.
But I would note that Mr. Scanziano taught on Friday training to all faculty on national suicide prevention.
Here at the high school.
At the high school, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I've seen online where entire schools have done a mental health first aid course. I mean, literally, there is such a thing. And then, they've all signed off on it.
So we actually had an interesting thing that came up on one of the people we interviewed for one of the vacant board position that I think we'll want to talk about moving forward. If you'll recall, one of the candidates suggested that he didn't know that there are other schools that are doing it, but there is a way to do kind of a very quick summary mental health screening as part of a physical, for example, that some companies do it, and that it could conceivably be translated over to a student population. It's just something, I think we got some information about it.
Right,
And
yeah.
we thought it was kind of intriguing.
interesting.
Yeah, something to think about anyway, and see if it could be done. But that's not done as part of the physical process now, necessarily. Could be. But anyway.
And so what I was saying at the end there was that with that Garrett Lee Smith suicide prevention initiative, with that small grant, that information had indicated 7 suicides in Guilford over that 5-year time span and 282 attempts. Now, it was not qualified about if the attempts are counted in the same way in which they are in the article, because the article obviously is only that result in hospitalization because it's public data at that point.
If
And
there's
I
an article
honestly
you
have
want us
not
to
crunched
read,
the numbers.
Please share the article
Yeah,
with
please,
us.
it's really hard to talk about an article we haven't read.
Right, we haven't read
You're,
yet.
you're at a different article now, I think.
No, it's
Or the grant application, what is,
I'm confused.
it is a report. It is a report of
can you send us the report?
of the Guilford Youth and Family Services, the task force that they had, I assume for a year, Guilford Suicide Prevention Task Force. Looked like it was partly preventative focused and partly what's called post-vention, for good reason. Has its own good
Happy to
reasons,
speak with Mrs.
focus.
Landry and look
Yeah,
at
we
that.
have pretty good contacts with Guilford Youth and Family Services. We can,
Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah,
get
they're
that.
very
What year is that?
critical. So that is, the data is 2009 through all of 2013.
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure we can get a copy from
Happy
Ms.
to touch
Landry.
base with Mrs. Landry. Miss Landry, yep, Mrs. Landry.
Well, and I'm happy to provide where I found that just came up online.
Well, if it's a Youth and Family
So,
Services report,
I-
we can get
We
it.
can get it.
But if, it sounds like you are expressing concern about the mental health of our youth. And I think we've expressed it, but I'll say it again. We take that very seriously. And our administration is taking that very seriously. And we are we continue to put additional pieces of intervention, action, education into professional development for faculty, into kind of peer approaches across the board, across the schools. So we can debate about the numbers, but certainly the issue is extraordinarily important to us, and will continue to be.
Well, so, I'm going to skip one thing I was going to say, excuse me. And so with regard to that, and with regard to it then being the top priority of the district in effect, the overall climate, for social and emotional health. And, I certainly applaud that an advisory committee was formed for the superintendent. But to my knowledge, that committee has met once in the first part of the fall. And its, second meeting is shortly, but I just wondered that doesn't sound like, honestly, it doesn't sound like a top priority and it's not the only thing happening in that genre of things, but when this advisory committee has only met, once, way back in the fall, and what else has been happening.
everything that I noted,
We-
but
we've-
Yeah, I was just going
talked
to say
about
what
the-
Dr. Freeman just reiterated, you know, that's not even everything, and what Dr. Balistraci referred to. I have to reiterate to what they've said, you know, I personally take this I think it is our priority. And there are numerous things happening at every level of our district.
And you've attended many meetings, and you've heard us
Yeah.
talking about this. I'm surprised, frankly.
Well, you know, I guess it comes to, I feel so strongly about it. So concerned and just feeling like, you know, shouldn't more be happening? And also because really it's all, excuse me. It's all part of just really a theme and a spectrum of what my husband and I, you know, when we came here with our children, what they then started encountering in the schools in part, and what I have observed in part, and what a number of other parents have observed, and I'm not saying it's a majority but there are others, and again, they do not come forward because of fear of retribution.
Well, let me put that to
So-
rest
can
right
I-
now, if I
let me-
can.
Can I
Let me-
just?
No, let me just put that to rest, because you've said that twice. Anybody who has concerns about the way a school is managed or about the way the their child is being treated in school, in my view, has a responsibility to bring that to the attention of an administrator. There will be no retribution. I've been on this board for 19 years, 19. I have never heard a parent say, my child was treated worse because I raised a concern with a teacher or a faculty, or a principal or a superintendent, ever. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, so
There is
that's-
no retribution. If your kid is in trouble,
It's unfounded,
you have a
yeah.
responsibility to say something.
Mhm.
In my opinion.
But that's what my question, yeah, the idea of a retribution on a family that brings forward a concern.
Well, and I'm
not
not
the
saying that
culture.
I'm not saying that fear
Yeah.
has any
Founding.
founding
Ms.
to
Reeder,
it.
we've given you about a half an hour, and I've been watching the clock and back a few. And so I'm very willing to, if you want to call me, I'm willing to talk. If you want to talk to Dr. Freeman and meet with Dr. Freeman, that's fine. I'm not going to talk about specific management issues. Dr. Freeman will talk about specific management issues. I'll be glad to talk about policy, and I'll be glad to talk about what our expectations are. But that's the process. That's the way we do things here, and it's worked. We think it's worked pretty well. So, if you have
If-
different experiences, that's fine. But you should talk to them. Talk to Dr. Freeman about them.
If I could just say that I think part of my concern is because certainly not everything, but a lot of what we have observed with the climate in the schools fits into this whole genre and topic and a part of the larger spectrum. And you can readily see, because I've seen in my own kids, how their anxiety and their stress is heightened. And yes, some of it is good and fine because it's instructional challenge, and that's great. But there's more than that, and it's a lot around behavioral controls, which are in policies and how policies are implemented. And, you know, the research says that folks who end up having anxiety disorders and mental health issues, that usually that was actually apparent back at the age of 6. But typically parents and even pediatricians and whatnot might, it's a phase, and it's usually about 1.5 years before, you know, intervention starts to be done that could have been done so much earlier. So when I see these statistics, and, you know, some of them are fact, perhaps there's more context around the fact or whatnot, but they're facts. And I see my own kids' experience and that of others, and it all kind of fits together. So then that made me more concerned. So I would just direct you to please check out the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. It's very easy, quick little summaries at the end of each section and whatnot. You can look at what chapter you want to or don't want to. Thematically, it connects in with so much of,
If you want to send us an email with the information, that's fine.
Can I also just add one more item, only because you brought it up tonight several times, and you mentioned it when you were here in January. Other families that you hear from that may or may be leaving Guilford. I know that Dr. Freeman, if he heard from families that were officially withdrawing their students, would have exit interviews if they would like them.
I'm happy to. We have in the past.
Not that I'm volunteering.
And again, I don't want to talk about individual family
Right.
decisions in a
Right,
public
exactly.
forum, but of course, I would be happy to meet with any parent who had similar concerns or felt that they needed to make a different decision for their family. Thank you.
All right, so
well, Ms. Sullivan, that was actually the very first point I had felt that I had made in January, which was that, at least in higher education boards, and there are different measures that are tracked, and the administration has responsibility for monitoring it, and its exits from the system.
But we don't do that, just to be clear. We don't do that as a Board of Education.
But the administration would be responsible for it, and so, yeah, there's actually a real effort to get that information. And it's incredibly valuable for institutions of higher education. It tells them way more about, issues that need to be addressed than the happy people that stick around or the people that are, don't say something and they should, or the people that say something and it just keeps getting sometimes fixed and sometimes not. So, so that was my point back then, is that some type of exit process should be happening, and in a way in which people feel free to speak or write or fill out the instrument truthfully.
would it be okay if we asked you to please meet with Dr. Freeman on these issues? It
Yeah,
would be you,
that's all
but, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else? All right, in the absence of anybody else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.